Hi, everyone. My name is Quinn. I'm the moderator for today's session on art and justice. I'm really excited to welcome all of you here today of the Access to Justice Through Art and Media panel. I'm excited to welcome all of you here. And while all of the panelists call Treaty 1 territory home, we all come from different paths with different sets of relationships and responsibilities to this territory. We acknowledge all of the relatives which sustain life here, the water and the plant and animal nations. We acknowledge our relatives in Treaty 5 territory whose lands have been flooded and lifeways irreversibly altered by hydroelectric development. We acknowledge our relatives in Shoal Lake 40 who went without access to drinking water for over 2 decades, while Winnipeggers enjoyed access to clean water diverted from Treaty 3 territory. Of Indigenous Ethics of Care, who has described the potentials for cultivating the possibilities of reconciliation in the following ways. For Indigenous peoples, reconciliation is a spiritual, cultural, and ontological reparative project with deep political implications, like land back, cash back, and worlds back, so that we can reproduce our futurities as peoples with distinct, long-standing, and pre-existing relationality with our lands. And for settlers, she offers a reminder that reconciliation is a reckoning with and commitment to changing behaviors, practices, beliefs, and structures that normalize colonial violence. It is a radical remembering of the responsibilities that come with the right to be on this land and the original laws, relationships, kinships, and treaties that permit them to be here. As we approach the 10-year anniversary of the release of the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, we acknowledge the need to reflect on our roles and responsibilities to honor treaty relationships and all of the opportunities to contribute both individually and collectively to respect the truths of Indigenous peoples' experiences and working towards reconciliation in a meaningful way. So as the moderator of today's panel, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to introduce myself. So I currently am working as a private Gladue writer through my company, which is called At the Root Consulting. And I also work with some of the organizations who are also involved in this panel. So I'm really excited to be here. My family comes from Saugeen First Nation and the Métis communities of Grand Marais and Traverse Bay. And I've been working in the area of justice for about 15 years. Through this panel, we hope to share about the collaborative and creative ways that access to legal information can be strengthened and how we can break down the legal barriers through art and media. If members of the audience have questions, please enter them into the Q&A section, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, and we'll keep time for a Q&A at the end of the panel. The recording of this panel will also be posted on the Manitoba Access to Justice.ca website in a few weeks' time. I'm going to hand it over to each panelist to introduce themselves and share in their own words about their respective initiatives in this area. Jessie?
Bonjour, Anim, Tensi, hello, bonjour. How's it going, everyone? My name is Jessie, full name Jessica Kennard. My spirit name is Starwolf. I'm from Saugeen First Nation, been born and raised here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm a Two-Spirit Anishinaabe. I'm a visual artist, but right now I'm a law student. I want to talk about how art has always been a form of communication, at least on Turtle Island, especially when it comes to sharing Indigenous legal orders. I'm going to share some photos of some art here on Turtle Island, and then I'm going to share some of my art and an art project that happened here at Robson Hall. All right, can people see that? Or can you, okay, sweet, awesome. So here, you can find this petriform at White Shell Provincial Park or at Bannock Point, estimated age like 1,500 years old. I've been coming here since like a teenager, and there's just so many of these petriforms around, and there's so many teachings attached to them. But even just sharing like just yeah, moving on from these petroforms, we have wampum belts. This is also artwork, and these were created to acknowledge treaty relationships between nations. The first top one, the Truro Wampum Belt, that one is just to acknowledge the relationship between Dutch settlers when they first arrived here in 1613. And there's a lot of meaning and teachings, but also legal orders attached to these pieces of art. Those two rows of blue are supposed to represent Indigenous and settlers. And yes, we share the land, but we also are allowed to be our own separate peoples and do our own separate things. Diversity is awesome, or that's what I see in this. The wampum belt below is the dish with one spoon wampum, and that's just talking about all of us together sharing the land and not using sharp things and sharing from this one bowl. And there's also many teachings tied to it about how we're supposed to keep the bowl clean. The bowl represents the land, but the bowl also represents all of our relationships together on this land. Moving on to like more contract type work, here is the Selkirk Treaty. So this treaty turned into what is now like Manitoba. And on the bottom, I want to highlight that the different nations are represented by clan animals. And so they're using drawings within this contract to acknowledge who they are and like who they're representing, because they're not just there by themselves, they're there representing their communities and their peoples. And talking about like using art to communicate, going to this Selkirk Treaty map, there you can see the different nations, clans, animals on there, but some of them are upside down. Some of them are walking towards the river. And so this is to signal that the animals that are upside down, those that are representing that clan, still want to talk about this. They're not fully okay with the agreement. So need to come back to the different terms and conditions in order for an agreement to happen. The two on the bottom, the ones that are walking towards the river, show that they're in agreement. There's also like a third option where the animal can be walking away from the river, and that shows that that group is not okay with the agreement. And so just, yeah, using visuals to communicate wants and needs. Because, yeah, not everyone's a reader, but I'll share more about that later. I just want to share a bit about this mural project here within Robson Hall. I was asked to create this mural, which is a more modern time form of art. I really like, it's my favorite. I love large scale. I love bright and bold, colorful like imagery. The title is Turtle Island. And when I was making this, I was thinking about all the relationships that are going on within Robson Hall, but also on the land that we're on, like Turtle Island itself or North America. At the end of the day, we all share this space. I'm sure we all love it for all different reasons and different purposes. Like I love the land, I love the water, I love the animals, I love the plants and all the things that they provide for us. Also, when going into Robson Hall, very colonial space, this is just to like brighten it up, to liven it up, to feel more welcoming. Because I was asked to do this near the Manitoba Indigenous Law Students Association space. So as you're like walking to their space or coming out of it, you will see this. And it's just to make people feel more at home, especially when they're like leaving their lands or leaving their communities and coming to this space to learn. And the turtle represents truth, which is one of the 7 sacred teaching animals. And I just thought it was very fitting for the law space because we have to tell the truth. It is about the truth. And yeah, just a reminder that the truth is alive and living. So I'm going to stop sharing it now and pass it off to the next person.
Miigwech, Jesse. Kirsten?
Hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen as well. My name is Kirsten Werman. I am a settler of European descent. I am a librarian who has worked in public legal education and public libraries for the past 20 years. And now I work for the Manitoba Library Association and also the Manitoba Law Library. Um, Importantly, though, for the last probably 20 plus years, I've worked in, volunteered in prisons, and especially prison libraries to provide information access. I co-founded the Manitoba Library Association Prison Libraries Committee back in 2012. So whenever I just start off, I always need to share that there are no what we would consider real libraries in provincial prisons in Manitoba, but what does exist is real information poverty, or what we are calling information marginalization. There are extreme issues for folks who are incarcerated to get information, and that can be access to legal information, health information, language learning, recreational reading, and educational or cultural information. Oops. Woo. I'm just trying to there we go. So our volunteer committee attempts to provide support for community members by bringing in books and legal material, but also resources for cultural learning and healing by bringing in authors to talk, arts programming, and workshops. We can do this by partnering with public libraries and Indigenous organizations, but also, really importantly, we've been doing this more and more with artists, singers, songwriters, poets, comic book artists, and authors. These are all examples on the screen here of art created by folks who were incarcerated and participated in our programming. So some more art here, just to show the powerful impact of arts programming in a prison or in a public library. When we create access to art and art making, we are then able to provide a wide range of ideas for everyone, whether it is to convey personal, social, historical, or political messages. But art and art making can really enhance daily life, create enjoyment in a visual piece, or it can also challenge the status quo. In our work, we try to meet folks where they're at, respecting their lived experiences and what they bring to the space with their own knowledge and understanding about themselves and wider society. And often what they bring into that space is art. So like beading, writing a poem, drawing, telling a story. The Legal Information for Incarcerated Manitobans project is actually the one fully funded project that I'm able to do while working in prison. So thank you to the Manitoba Law Foundation. And this brings together the Prison Libraries Committee together in partnership with the Manitoba Law Library. And this initiative specifically looks at the unmet legal information needs of incarcerated Manitobans. So some of our work so far includes creating and delivering legal book and resource collections to all the provincial prisons. But our latest project is the creation of a graphic novel. And we really think that a graphic novel can help folks with low and multi-literacies better understand the legal system and hopefully build their legal capability, and best offer an equitable learning experience through also multi-modality. So a multi-literacies approach makes use of learners' unique ways of knowing, being, and doing, and thereby obviously creating a more accessible but a more inclusive learning environment. And using multi-modes of communication can help make better sense of information, including legal information within the world around us. Graphic novels, like the examples shown here, combine text, images, sometimes color, shading, and shapes to help tell a narrative. The graphic novel that we are creating combines interviews or narratives with justice involved people, and we are interspersing these narratives with legal primers, all information that we hope will help the reader better understand the realities, but also the letter of the law. Something that we've done really importantly is we've hired a cultural consultant for the graphic novel. Thank you, Quinn. Hiring this consultant has helped us do this work with the ethics and respect that are central to Indigenous ways of doing and knowing. Just as a final example, I just wanted to share a piece of art by local Métis artist Mark Zastra. He was commissioned to do this land acknowledgement for the 2025 Prairie Comic Festival. And we hope Mark will be able to do the cover art for our graphic novel. And I think his work exemplifies the visual impact, but also the knowledge that can be gained through art and hopefully through our graphic novel. And that's it from me. I will turn it over to our next speaker.
Thanks, Kirsten. Mark?
Anse no Wagamaganok, Mino Apagisagao, Zunge Mede. I'm Mark Cruz, he, him, English, Irish, Soto from the Muscogee First Nation Treaty 4. I'm the Director of Indigenous Legal Learning and Services here at Robson Hall, also a practicing lawyer with Reese Dick Regala Law as a defense lawyer, do some teaching and some other things too here at Robson Hall. And I'm here today to talk a bit about podcasts. So at Robson Hall, we now have a podcast studio set up in our MLT Aikens classroom, sort of an initiative that started under Dean Jockelson during COVID, when we all started recognizing, more virtual opportunities for learning, and also just wanting to provide a space for our faculty and students to engage with the public in a more sort of front-facing and accessible way. Often legal information is quite hard to understand, and we have legalese, and it can be quite impenetrable for the average sort of Canadian. And so we wanted to provide the podcast, which is a more conversational tone. It's a way to get to know people a little more, even for our own students who interact with our faculty in a more sort of classroom setting. It's a way to get to know some of those folk a little better. So we have our Robson Radio podcast that's hosted on YouTube. I'm adding it to our panelist chat. I'm not sure if there's a way to get that to everybody else, but if you just Google Robson Hall podcasts, it'll come right up. So we have a few on there already, an interview with Dean Jockelson, an interview with myself, and some of our distinguished visitors as well. So as I said, podcasts are a little more conversational and a way, again, to get information across in hopefully a more accessible way. It's also an opportunity, as I noted, for Robson Hall to get information out. So just having the Dean and myself talk about sort of the programming that we're developing here, talking about our Access to Justice framework that we're really trying to bring to all of our program here at Robson Hall. And I'm happy to work with all the folk on this call on several different projects. And I'm very happy that Jessie was able to show her mural, because that's one of the big projects we were working on. It took several years of bureaucracy to get through, but finally we were able to get that mural out. And again, sort of, as she noted, brighten the space and invite people in a way that Robson Hall really hasn't been able to do before. And that's something that podcasts are able to do as well. It's sort of opening the curtain and revealing some of the knowledge that probably far too often was isolated within this building, and finding ways to get it out to the general public. I am starting a podcast called Neo Newtonwick. That means the four winds. And we're focused on Indigenous legal orders and focusing on natural laws. And having that conversational tone, we're inviting knowledge holders from several nations in Manitoba to discuss the Indigenous legal orders of their nation. But also framing that within those four winds and the four seasons. And so we only plan to have four podcasts released sort of at the end of the year for each season, where we'll be discussing the sort of doors of that season, the animals and the spirits of those seasons, and also how we tell story and how we tell law to each other in those spaces. So I'll be able to talk a little bit more in the future, but this is a way hopefully to get Indigenous legal orders to the public, but also as a teaching resource, not just for universities, but it's an open source platform. So hopefully any teacher across Canada could use it if they'd like. And really, hopefully to continue this access to justice and information project that Robson Hall is really focusing on now. So I think I'll talk more about podcasts into the questions that are coming up. So I'll leave my intro there and pass it to the next.
Great, Mark. Listen.
Hi, folks. I'm Allison Fensky. I am clinical counsel at the U of M's Faculty of Law. Included in that wide range of a job title is I'm the director of the University of Manitoba Community Law Center and also help to lead a human rights clinic. I'm here because I wanted to talk a bit about our UMCLC prison law clinic and some of the projects that we've been working through that prison law clinic. You heard earlier, we've been collaborating with Kirsten's group and the Prison Libraries Committee to help provide some of the legal information and work on some of the storylines within the graphic novel project. So that's been a really exciting opportunity for us to experiment with different mediums of getting access to accurate legal information out into the world. And the other thing that we've been experimenting with has been around radio as a great form of communications for our clients. So we were invited through the Manitoba Prisoner Solidarity Network into a collaboration that they've been working on with DJ Dialogue at Hip Hop 101 on UMFM. DJ Dialogue has noticed that they have a big listener base in Manitoba prisons and has been responsive to those listener requests for more discussions about really important topics. Things like police violence against Indigenous people. They had another panel on Indigenous fathers, the child welfare system, and policing. And we appeared on the radio show in a panel about really addressing direct questions from listeners. Folks can write into a PO box address with questions. And so we put together a panel of myself, our staff lawyer, Leif Jensen, and Senator Kim Pate, who does a lot of advocacy around prison issues, as well as Stacey Soldier, the Bar Association president. We all work together to address the questions from listeners about conditions within Manitoba prisons and jails, people's conditions, decarceration, and other important topics within that kind of carceral realm. And so for us, it was really important to be able to be responsive to a community need. Folks were reaching out for this kind of information. We talk a lot in legal communities about outreach. At the Prison Law Clinic, we have to do a lot of inreach. We can't rely on the same kinds of traditional mediums to get the word out there. Our clients don't have access to the internet. They have very irregular access to phones, while calls out to legal counsel are free. Other forms of telecommunications and calls out to family and other getting connected with some of the community organizations that we partner with are really cost prohibitive, given the incredible fees paid through the for-profit prison telephone system. And so just being able to experiment with different mediums in order to reach the people that we're trying to connect with has been, and trying to be creative in that has been a really eye-opening way for us to try to experiment more with artistic mediums as a means of legal communication. So thanks.
Thanks, Allison. I also sent a link to DJ Dialogue's archive. So hopefully Natasha can send that out, and it's the October 8th archive where the panel that Allison was talking about, you can find it there. I just want to say thank you to all of you for the work that you do. It's been really exciting to be able to work with all of you in different projects and on different initiatives, and that's all been very exciting to kind of see this cultivation of different mediums being used as a way to improve access to legal information, and also the really positive responses that have kind of come from making those different modalities available. So I kind of want to jump into the questions. And our first question, Mark, if you can start with the answer, but each of the projects that you've come to share about have been cultivated really organically out of a need in the community and are done by engaging important collaborative elements. Why are collaborative methods beneficial to improving access to legal information?
Yeah, well, thanks. So as I sort of noted about the podcast generally, it was a collaboration with MLT Aikens to really get the podcast studio set at Robson Hall. So we have it set up in one of our classrooms, and it is accessible for all of our students and faculty to sort of use. And again, that sort of came out of that need for really sharing what's often behind these very closed doors with the public. I'm speaking more directly to the podcast that I've sort of started, the Neo-Newtonwick. That sort of came out of collaboration with Margaret Hart. She works with rehab sciences and the occupational therapy. She's indigenized their curriculum based on Innu Cree knowledge systems. And so they've embraced Wagutwin as the framing for their entire curriculum, which they've started to teach this year. And Wagutwin sort of means kind of all of our relations. It's a recognition of our relational responsibilities, not just to ourselves as humans, but to the more than human world, and really framing the first natural law teaching. So our first podcast is actually with George Muswagon. He is an Innu knowledge holder and has worked with the university in several capacities and worked with MF NERC, the First Nation School Division, for several years. So both Margaret and George have a long history of bringing Indigenous knowledge systems, not just into the curriculum, but basing an entire curriculum on these knowledge systems. And so we were in discussions, just as I'm trying to indigenize our curriculum here at Robson Hall, and sort of noting the differences in some of those challenges, but also really finding a collaborative way to work together. And that's what you really find in most Indigenous spaces, that collaboration is key. Interdisciplinariness is just accepted as the mode of knowledge transfer. The idea of siloing knowledge systems into law and health and education and all of these separate things, as we do in a sort of a European university, is very foreign to Indigenous knowledge systems, which are much more holistic and understanding that if we're talking about law, we're also talking about health. We're also talking about education, because that's where we get those words like Mino Bizatawewin or Mino Bizatawewin. How do we live a good life? And that's, again, not just focused on the human, but how do we live a good life with all of our relations? So with our animal friends and brothers and sisters, with the water, with the sky, with the earth. You know, it's been said by others that our DNA is of earth and sky. So a recognition that Indigenous folk around Turtle Island know that they are of this place and from this place, and because of that, we have a special relationship and special duties and responsibilities. And so those are the kind of conversations we want to have with our podcast. Obviously, in the legal space, there is an appetite for engaging with Indigenous legal orders, understanding what that word even means, and how we're going to sort of engage in a good way with those knowledge systems. So not just extracting knowledge and sort of just putting it into a class here or there, but really finding ways to incorporate those knowledge systems throughout the legal education experience here at Robson Hall. And to do that work, I've had to reach out across the campus, and I've worked with VP Indigenous as well on several initiatives, because again, that interdisciplinariness is just so important. We can't talk about how we ought to live and without also talking about how we stay healthy. What does a healthy community look like? What does healthy relationships, again, with the land and the water and other things look like as well? And so sitting in a podcast studio allows us to have a conversation, which is much closer to how knowledge would have been transferred in our traditional forms anyway. We have a communal epistemology from an Indigenous perspective, meaning that every lived experience has its own truth and its own value, and it's only collectively when we share our experience and our understanding of the world that we can come to truth. So similar to a judge in that adversarial notion that both sides are going to present their arguments and there's this arbiter of truth, instead it's saying collectively we all have to talk. We all have to come to a decision together. And that's sort of where the Anishinaabe word for law, the Anakonagewan, what is the rule that we're coming to? What's the consensus we're coming to? And so the podcast, again, as that form, allows us to have those kind of conversations, especially when we're listening to elders. It also is a way for us to sort of mirror how one should engage with an elder, actively listening, but often an elder will ask a question after telling a story, and it's a chance for, to engage with those knowledge systems. And also a recognition that this is part of that oral history transfer. These conversations wouldn't happen just once. You wouldn't just come to a panel or a lecture and hear a story once and then become an expert in that story or those laws. It's only after talking repeatedly with different folk and different elders that really the law or the truth or that natural law, because it's a lived law, comes out and comes across. And so that collaborative process, again, is essential. And also, all of these Indigenous legal orders are not going to be found in a university. We haven't engaged well with them before, and all of these legal orders come from community and come from specific places. So another reason in our podcast why we're trying to bring scholars from different spaces. So George Muswegan was our first scholar. He's Inuit from Cross Lake, Norway House area. Our second podcast is going to be with Eric Cruchain from Saging. He's on an early path into some Medewan teachings and brings more of the Anishinaabe perspective. And we're hoping to grab and gather knowledge holders from other nations in Manitoba for the last two. And again, we started with the spring with George. We'll do the summer with Eric, and then we'll have the fall and winter with our other two knowledge holders. And then we'll kind of have a package of 4 podcasts that we'll be able to present, hopefully at the end of the year. We're getting a little held up on some branding, so we need images and songs and things to really produce like a high-end product that we're hoping to do at the end. But again, the form of podcast itself is about collaboration, bringing in those voices and allowing us to have those kind of conversations. So coming back to the Distinguished Visitor Lecture Series, so instead of just having a visitor come in and give a one-off lecture with Q&A, it's an opportunity for us to sit with faculty or with legal scholars and those visitors and pull out and have better conversations. It's a little more again, accessible and hopefully not as legalese or in that professional tone. And again, all this is hosted on YouTube, so they'll be open source. Anyone with an internet connection can access it. So maybe I'll stop talking there and pass it to our next panelist.
Thanks, Mark. That's very exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing those and learning more from all of the folks that you mentioned. That's really exciting to hear. Allison, did you want to share a little bit about when we did the radio panel and some of the other work with the graphic novel?
Yeah, thanks, Quinn. So, I mean, what Mark is talking about when we talk about collectivity and collaboration is just really at the heart of what we're trying to do. It's so important that we collaborate with others, and that's really what gives us that opportunity to fit in. I see so much of what we do as lawyers. For myself in my own approach, obviously, I had, prior to joining the University of Manitoba, I worked for a long time in the kind of human rights law field, and really from a place of navigating different oppressive forces and figuring out how to address the legal needs of people who are most marginalized. And thinking about marginalization is not something that is like part of a person's identity, but is actually more of a state, like a force of state oppression, and something done to someone as opposed to like who they are as a being. And so coming from that framing and really thinking about access to justice and thinking about our roles as lawyers, one of our obligations is as a kind of intermediary, really, right? Like we have an obligation to not only zealously represent the interests of our clients, but to uphold the administration of justice within the broader legal system. And when you have that obligation and the system that you're meant to uphold and promote the administration of justice within is also a site of like significant colonial oppression, you know, reckoning with that means that we have to do a lot of things to, I think, be like interrogate our own roles in it and where we best fit in. And so I've always thought of that role of a lawyer as someone who has a level of skills and knowledge and expertise that allows you to be an intermediary between a system that is not always meant to or works, frankly, works the way it's intended to work in a lot of ways, which is it creates significant barriers for the people that are coming in and and needing to access it. So what can we do from a more like breaking down those barriers and more from like a harm reduction standpoint even? And how do we uphold the knowledge that we have and really share and communicate it with? And so for that I think is at the basis of a lot of this like form of collaboration is just like, how do you need me? Where can I fit in? Like I've got a particular skill set and I'm happy to lend that to these kinds of different endeavors. So, you know, when Kirsten's group approached us with like incredible work that they're doing on this graphic novel project, it's really excited because we have a really small part to play, right? I can marshal resources around the student clinics that we have where we're able to provide that legal information, where we're able to look at scripts, where we're able to fact check some of the stories in terms of the legal information that's coming up through them, where we're able to point out where, you know, that's probably someone's lived experience, but that's also not the way it's supposed to go, right? And to acknowledge, because so often we're like, well, this is the way the system works, without acknowledging that a lot of people's experiences don't always match up with what is intended to be the way that things operate. And so having ways to honor both those kinds of truths. And where that comes from, I think currently in the role that I have is in, you know, what is a really unique model for the provision of legal services, right? The University of Manitoba Community Law Center is a long-standing partnership between Legal Aid Manitoba and the university, and has been supported for many years by the Manitoba Law Foundation. And because of a significant further investment from the Manitoba Law Foundation, we were able to open the first prison law clinic here in Manitoba, where we're able to provide dedicated legal services around prison law, which is not just, you know, criminal law in prisons or some other area of law in prisons. It really is a specialized area of practice that covers a lot of different intersecting kind of traditional areas of law. And so being able to do that from a place where you are connected to an institution like Legal Aid that does incredible work in order to meet the needs of folks who are not otherwise able to access lawyers, access the legal system, and do that from a place within the university where you have at its core a commitment to learning, to creativity, to innovation. That marriage between those two institutions allows us as a service provider to approach our work with a lot more flexibility and responsiveness to community needs. So we provide the kind of traditional, we'll represent you in your disciplinary charge hearing, but we also have a space to play in terms of how we are best connecting with our clients and how we're going to make sure that the information they need is getting to them, and that we're being responsive to the community we serve. And it's more than the folks who are behind bars, like those are our clients, but they're surrounded by people who love and care for them. And that's also the community that we serve. And so being able to be responsive to folks like the Native Clan organization when they're looking for collaboration and where they're looking for support for their folks, being responsive to the Prisoner Solidarity Network or to calls from the Prison Libraries Committee. Like I'll always answer the phone when a librarian's calling. They've got the best ideas and they're doing amazing work, right? And so like just knowing that there are so many other folks who are doing important work and how can we best support them is something that's been really exciting in some of the collaborations we've been able to be a part of.
Thanks, Allison. Jesse, did you want to talk about kind of some of the collaborative elements of your work?
I would love to. For me, collaboration, I think about teamwork makes the dream work. Without collaboration, we won't know what other people's dreams are unless we're all sharing. With the mural project, Turtle Island here at Robson Hall, that came from the need from Indigenous students to feel like they belong and see themselves in Robson Hall as like becoming a lawyer, being a law student. It's like, from my own personal experience, it has been really, really hard. Like, yeah, also like with collaboration and like lawyers getting out into community, that's also like super important. And to collaborate as community members from all our different walks of life, that's really important to happen. And it's so needed, because when I was like a kid and a youth, I did not like institutionalized learning at all. I did not feel like it was a space for me. It dampened my spirit and made it hard for me to see myself in this world. And it wasn't until I found alternative forms of education through like art programming, and these art programming bringing in different humans from different walks of life. Like through art programming, I was able to actually meet like lawyers and see them as the human beings they are, not just the ideas that I've seen on TV, because like accessing the law is very hard unless you got the monies for it, or at least from the communities that I've come from. And yeah, so just being collaborative is so needed. Being out in community is so needed. And like going to different spaces and places is so needed. Yeah. And that's what I'm just going to share for this question.
Thanks, Jesse. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think, I'm thinking about Allison after we did the panel, having folks, call into the prison law clinic and, felt like someone cared about them and felt represented and cared for by folks who were sharing that information. And so the impact of that can be seen kind of throughout these different projects. And Kirsten, I know we've seen that in the graphic novel project. And so I'm wondering if you have anything to add to this question about kind of those collaborative benefits.
Yeah, so I mean, libraries are all about connecting and interconnectedness. I think this is something that we've done for forever. And there's this concept of third space, this space between work and home and school and home, and that's been sort of kind of expanded to include libraries, that libraries are really a third space, this gathering, meeting, connecting place. And I mean, to interconnect with each other and to share information, and to share stories. And we can only hope that we can create those types of third spaces, excuse me, in prisons. We're definitely not there yet. That's part of the work that we do as well, is advocating for the importance of these spaces. But like Jesse said earlier, I mean, like universities, prisons, and even libraries are still very colonial institutions, but we still make sure that there are those interconnectedness, books as being a great connector to people, information, and knowledge. But the workshops, the programming, that's even better because you bring the people in. But this project, the PLC and this graphic novel project, only exists because of the collaboration and the relationship building. And that's always so important too, is taking that time to build those relationships. When we say collaboration, that's what I always hear as well, that we build relationships. So with law students, with lawyers, with law professors. I mean, I have to say, working on this project, it's made me see law professors and lawyers in a different light as well. Jesse, I see the same thing. And it's just so rewarding and such a great learning experience. But we are also really interconnected and collaborating with incarcerated and formerly incarcerated folks, with family and loved ones, with community members. And even the folks who I'm interviewing, I don't even hate the word interviewing, who I'm having a conversation with, are co-creators and co-partners in this graphic novel. They're included and invited to collaborate in every step along the way. So for me, collaboration is like just the hugest thing. And I'm already learning so much, just even in this question mark. I want to talk to you about this podcast and how we can maybe get it onto a USB and bring it into the prison. So this is fantastic. Thank you.
That's awesome. I love that idea. And I was also thinking maybe there's an opportunity to share it through Hip Hop 101 when, some of those episodes are available. So, even through this conversation, we're kind of demonstrating the possibilities of that, which is awesome. And I think what you were talking about, Kirsten, leads really well into the next question. And Jesse, I'm hoping you can start us off with your thoughts on how getting creative with information sharing makes the legal system more accessible to folks in community.
So not everyone reads or wants to read. For me personally, it takes a lot of energy to turn words and like understand them on paper. I'm a visual learner, always has been, or I'd rather like listen to people talk about it more than I would actually like to read about it, even though you can get all that like condensed info and like get specific to the facts and stuff, but it's just not the same as listening to someone passionately talk about it. It makes it more real for me. And different ways of sharing, like art is a word that encompasses a lot of different things like writing, dance, music, to the visuals, sculptures, all of that stuff. And with like, it just creates these wonderful spaces and moments in time where it's inclusive, like anyone can come and make art. You don't have to go on to like art school to be an artist. That's for sure. And within these spaces and time, when we're like creating art together, like I've been in a lot of different art projects where like you have your group of humans from all these different like spaces and being, then you have your like facilitator of the art workshop to like show the different medium that we'll be like making art in, but then you have these guests come in from different walks of community to just talk and share about what they're doing, and we all like sit together and like make art together and learn about this new medium, but also be introduced to this world that you probably wouldn't have ever like stepped foot in or got close to, or you've never been in that social circle if it wasn't for this like moment in time where you're creating art or making art. And then like symbolism within art helps pushes things forward. I know creatively, like people are making infographics, and especially on like social media, I love that. Like memes, great way to start like getting introduced to like a topic for sure. And then you can expand on it. Yeah, just, yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
I love that. And as you were talking, I was thinking about I was writing a Gladue report for someone, and in trying to capture the experience that their parent had shared about residential school, I referenced Kent Monkman's painting The Scream, because that was the only way to really capture the essence of what they were talking about. And so, having art that can do that is so helpful in those moments where words really aren't able to capture the energy and kind of the spirit of what's taken place, or maybe what's to come. And we can see that in your mural, right? Like it's such a beautiful representation and welcoming and kind of brightening of the spirit of that place. And so I want to acknowledge that and thank you for reminding me of that. Allison, would you like to share a little bit about kind of creativity and access to the legal system?
Yeah, I mean, if I think about, again, grounding it in the experience of running a prison law clinic, I mean, it is really quite challenging to provide legal services in carceral environments, right? Folks have a fairly good or at least a basic understanding of various legal processes. We have an open court principle. There's a lot of kind of media. Think about, maybe it's not great if all someone knows about the legal system is what they saw on TV. It's not always the most accurate, but we have a lot of that kind of medium and availability of like information and connection points too. And I just find that once people are sentenced and then head to a place of incarceration, oftentimes it is physically away from community. It is hard to access. It's hard for us to access as lawyers, right? We're at the behest of the institution as to whether or not we're even going to be allowed to see clients. There are very significant restrictions on when we can visit, how we can visit. Things are improving with the advent of like video communications, but it's still not perfect because you've got to get someone on the institution to set it up. Right? You're playing telephone tag constantly. You're already working in an environment where you have to be creative in order to kind of work outside of the bounds of a more kind of like traditional big firm office experience. If you're going to actually be able to do your job as a lawyer. And so when I think you're already kind of in that position of where there's this push and pull towards being a bit more like ready to think outside the box and how to get your job done, it's only natural that you then can incorporate more kind of a broadened creativity around that, right? And so some of it is forced by the nature of the work. And then you have to try and turn that into an opportunity. And so for us, it's about meeting folks where they're at. If they're listening to DJ Dialogue on a Friday night, then I'm going to get on that show and I'm going to answer their questions. If we haven't heard from VNC, like visiting in communications for a week and are having a hard time getting appointments with our clients, right? We can get information out that way. And it's just about leaning into those alternative forms of communication and being ready to be adaptable and be creative. One of our family mantras for me as a kid growing up, my dad was a hockey player. This came from one of his coaches, was always the idea that success is the ability to adjust. And so that was often just a framing of how we would navigate things that kind of came our way. And so that was really ingrained in me as a kid and something that I've brought also into my own legal practice. And so I think, again, you've got to play with your definition of success, right? Like, what is a win here? Sometimes a win is just getting a meeting with someone, having that information, building that trusting relationship. And it might not actually be a win at the trial, right? Because that might be something that's like removed from that person's experience. And maybe that's not a likely outcome for them, but we can find wins in other ways. And I think it's that ability to adjust and lean into more creative pursuits that allow us to actually do our work as zealous advocates and as lawyers.
Thank you. Kirsten and Mark, I think that kind of what Allison was talking about leads really well into kind of adjusting and adapting and figuring out different ways to share information. And both of your projects kind of came out of circumstances like that, where there was a need to adjust and adapt and find kind of creative solutions to information sharing. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you've seen your projects contribute to a more accessible legal system. Kirsten, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think I spoke about this sort of in my initial 5 minutes, just about kind of trying to make access to information more equitable by really understanding, again, like Jesse was saying, about multiliteracies that exist. Not everyone can get their information through reading and writing for multiple reasons. They might not have the education background, but they might just not connect with information in that way. So there's so many different literacies, the traditional, the digital literacy, which unfortunately is not, available to folks in prison, but visual literacy, the physical literacy. I love that you mentioned dance as well, movement, like that is all part of literacy. And I think that's something that we have to really expand our minds and creative abilities to acknowledge that this is how we have to create a more equitable access to information. We just need to, yeah, really acknowledge that people learn and gain knowledge in different ways. But also to engage with that creative thinker in all of us. Again, I think, Jesse, you're just speaking my language here. You mentioned this as well, that we all have this creative abilities. And I think library workers are also very creative and critical thinkers. And we hope to instill and create that and build that and inspire that in with our patrons and with our community. So allowing that self to emerge is important on many levels, including access to legal information. And so we're definitely testing this out with the graphic novel, but I think also, just to add on to what Allison said too, we really show that we care and are invested in this work by constantly showing up. We go into the prisons, we constantly show up, even if we keep getting, caught up in lockdowns, or, they cancel because of lack of staff or whatever the reason is, we still show up. I ran into a guy on Thursday at Headingley, and he said, "Were you the one that brought in that book on Nelson Mandela?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I remember I said that, months and months ago." And he was so, so happy and grateful. And that just sort of created this kind of like this different type of relationship, because he knew, oh, we're still here, we're still going to try at our very best to answer your requests and to provide that access to information. I don't know if I answered that at all, but I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
Yeah, I think you did. It's all right. Yeah, so being creative, I think is really important. And in the podcast idea, it's also about meeting people where they're at. The podcast form is one of the most popular forms that people take in their information. They can listen to it, or they can sit down and watch the YouTube video over their lunch break. And again, it's just a form that folk are really getting more used to taking information in as. And there is that ability to be a little more creative and on that spot, and it's a little more dynamic. Because again, often legal information has been presented in the lecture format, the expert above, just disseminating the best knowledge. And it's not really a place of co-creating a learning environment in ways that's really necessary, especially for Indigenous legal orders, and to really get folk to have an understanding of the foundation of those laws and how to use them, basically. How are we going to not just talk about Indigenous legal orders, but put them into practice? So hopefully finding ways for our lawyers and students to gain a competency, but moving beyond a competency to a fluency, where we can have a conversation of mutual respect and understanding. Because at the moment, we can't really be creative together. There isn't a way to talk about the common law and Indigenous legal orders in a really good way, because not enough Canadians have an understanding or respect for those knowledge systems and ways of knowing. So I think a conversation with Indigenous folk just talking about their laws and about their ways of knowing and being is a easier way to invite people in. Because that's another barrier for this information transfer is people, even if they want to work towards reconciliation, maybe don't think they can participate in the space, or they don't know how to do that. And a podcast is a safe space to do that. You can listen to it on your own, you can watch it on your own, and you can really engage with it that way. And it's also a way to just embrace the technology of the age as well. We're moving more and more into these digital forms. We all have these little smartphones, and so it's a way to really allow legal information to get out again of just these very closed off institutional and colonial doors. And we have to be more creative to get that out there, to also push past some of those tropes that we've been talking about, the lawyer on TV or just the lecturer with this pure knowledge sending it out. An acknowledgement that we're all learning together still. We're finding ways to communicate, and that's sort of where reconciliation really is at. Can we get to a place where we can respect each other enough to have meaningful conversations and challenging conversations as well? And a podcast is a way to do that as well. we can challenge each other in those moments, and we can ask tough questions, but again, without it sort of being in that very formal sort of way. And then also, Indigenous legal orders are and often were more orally transmitted or transmitted through dance and ceremony, and just modes that don't really translate to the written word or to that lecture format. And so it's another, the podcast form again is a way to sort of honor those traditions and ways of knowledge transfer. Yeah, I think I can leave that for the next question.
Thanks, Mark. I really like that idea of fluency that you're talking about as a way to build understanding so that we can get to a point of having those tough conversations and to be able to have, all of these different options that you're talking about as a way to build people's understanding, build their fluency with these ideas, and how to build relationships in a way that you can feel, right? Because if you're listening to a podcast or you're looking at a mural that Jesse's done, or listening to the radio or looking at the graphic novel, you're experiencing different feelings, as an Indigenous person, as a settler, as people from different backgrounds, and so that kind of building of fluency leads into the next question that I have for you, which kind of speaks to how each of these projects are rooted in what is sometimes described as felt knowledge, which Diane Millian, who's a scholar of Indigenous feminism, describes as an underlying component of the ways we know the world. And so I'm hoping to pose a question to each of you about why is this type of knowledge important for improving access to legal information. And I think you've all kind of touched on this already in really important ways, but if there's anything that you'd like to add in this, I'll let Kirsten start it off.
Thanks. Yeah, I think this is really critical to the work that we're doing. The lived experience that is shared by folks is so critical in helping us build the collections, create these spaces, and to provide workshops and do this graphic novel. And we really value this gift. And I don't think that gift is really always at all valued within a carceral setting. And we, I think I'd mentioned earlier that we take this community development approach where we're going in, we're not necessarily experts, we're in this unfamiliar space. And this lived knowledge, this felt knowledge helps guide us and informs us every step of the way. And as we learn and as we get further and deeper into this legal information project, and especially the graphic novel, I'm realizing we might need to deviate a little bit. We might need to just stop. We learn something new. Oh, what we thought we were, how the path we were going on. No, we need to be flexible. There's something new. There's something unexpected that we're learning right in the moment. Of course, that makes it hard when you're, working on a grant and maybe you haven't like covered all of that in the grant, but that's okay. You have to actually, through the relationship building, through this sharing, and this important sharing of this felt knowledge is something that has to be incorporated in all the work that you do. And I hadn't mentioned, I did just want to quickly just mention the PLC is also creating a collection called the Joe Big George Indigenous Collection. And this is a collection that also will go into all of the provincial prisons. No funding for that one, but through this collection and inspired by Joe, who was an elder at Milner Ridge and in Stoney, and was incarcerated himself, we really hope that the graphic novel, the Indigenous collection, will help reaffirm the reader's identity as being really vital, and living, and that their needs and their experiences are seen and are valued. And in a space like a prison where we know it's totally overrepresented by Indigenous folks, 80 to 90% in provincial prisons. I think this is really important to advocate for. And you know, even the interviews, or these meetings, these talks, these conversations that we've had with our co-creators of the graphic novel, I try very hard to adopt a narrative inquiry approach, that can allow for stories, that show sort of the becoming and stories of possibility, that can emerge. And I think we have so much to sort of learn from that. And I know Million also talks about colonization or colonialism as a felt affective relationship. And you know, anything related to sort of how you feel and your feelings and moods, isn't always totally respected, but art is such a good way to approach that, and to sort of explore that type of relationship, because art does relate to your inner world, and your inner feelings and attitudes. It's deeply personal. So I was sort of all over the place, but this is really an important aspect, I think, of any work that we do in the prison. So I'll turn it over to somebody.
Jessie, do you want to add to that and some of the work that you do?
Yes, please. So with felt knowledge, I see that as someone's intuition. I, as an Anishinaabe, I see myself like I have my spiritual component, I have my physical body component, I have my mind, I have my heart, and all of them working together like is me. With like legal information, I see that as very like mind heavy. And with art, I see that as interacting with my mind, my body, my spirit, my heart. And so with like legal information and pairing that with art, you're going to hit all that different aspects of yourself. And also believing and like following your intuition is really, really important. I think like as individual human beings, we're reasonable. I trust us in some weird way, shape, or form that we're actually all here trying to like do what's best and like give our best and trying to like be good people, and we all want that good life. And following our intuition, following that felt knowledge will help lead towards that good life. Yeah, just legal information paired with art would help a lot more with hitting the spirit, hitting the body, and also like including, yeah, your heart. Thanks.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jessie. Mark, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think it's a very important sort of piece for disseminating legal information, especially to non-colonial communities, folks who don't share this hegemonic idea that the common law is paramount, that it is the only way of knowing and being. And unfortunately, our universities in general, not just in law, but across spectrums, have really picked up that Enlightenment sentiment versus reason, as if they are opposed, and we need to become more objective, more cold, more reasonable and scientific, because sentimentality leads us astray. And that's just a false dichotomy, and it's one that makes legal information just inaccessible to anyone who doesn't hold those foundational principles. And Indigenous legal orders are lived law. They're dynamic. They include all the four elements that Jessie spoke about. When we talk about Bizadawewan, that's the good life. That's a holism. How do we live understanding all of those components? So we can't just have legal information presented that explain it in that colonial way too, that just assume that, our way of writing reports, our way of putting information together is the right way to do it. And coming back to the creative question, we need to be more creative on how we're going to share informations about this. It can't just be, here's how to read your release document. It could be a little more about why is this release? Why are there these conditions? Like, what does this mean to you? How do you actually work with it? And how do you let your community know how to help you with those sort of things? Which again, a lot of legal information presupposes that you're very literate, that you have finances to access folk to help you with this information. There's just a lot of presuppositions that just make this knowledge inaccessible, or traditionally has made it inaccessible to most folk. So that felt knowledge comes across much more through art, through conversation, through these visual mediums, through actually sitting with the folk and building relationships with them, and not assuming that you have the answers to their questions or the best way to answer their questions, because you don't know them. You don't know their lived experience or what extra needs they might have. And that comes back to that respect piece. We have to respect the lived experience of others. We have to trust that they're actually experts of themselves in ways that we are not. We can't presuppose that just because we can put you in all these different social categories that we understand you as a human being. It's only through our hearts and through that sentiment that we're going to really break down a lot of those barriers. So I think that felt knowledge should lead and guide us as well. Like, obviously the mind is very prominent in law and in this legal information, but the mind alone can lead to catastrophe and leads to things like colonization and genocide, because we're so certain we're right. We're so certain of our worldview that we can dismiss anyone who doesn't follow or share our sort of secular belief structure, and demand that, no, we talk about spirit, that we talk about how this feels for us. And so yeah, I think all of our work in this space and this access to justice has to have this felt knowledge dynamic and that respect for different epistemologies, different ways of knowing and interacting with this information.
Yeah, I think that that's so critically important, and just building those opportunities to provide space where people can build that level of comfortability to engage with different spaces. You and I have talked about, inviting folks to come and sweat or sit around a sacred fire, and how intimidating that can feel at first, but then once you experience it and have a better understanding, it makes it a little bit easier to appreciate the benefit of those things to others, especially in a legal context. So, Allison, did you have anything to add to this question, or did you want to talk about kind of envisioning different projects that you've been involved in as kind of an educational tool for new lawyers?
Yeah, I'll just I'll kind of segue into the next one, but what I wanted to say and really picks up on what Mark was talking about is just, again, recognizing that people are the experts in their own lived experience, and recognizing the different ways of having knowledge, of holding knowledge. And so yeah, I think that I just wanted to again acknowledge like the importance of that felt knowledge, because if what we're trying to do is improve access to legal information, like, know your audience, right? And so you can have all this information, but that you need some mode of transmission, right? Like, you need a way to take that information and have it land and then have it be felt and understood by someone. And so if we don't come from a place of knowing how people are already experiencing that sense of who they are and how they move through the world, right, then we're likely to kind of be talking across purposes. And so, if I think about how all of that works to envision what this looks like in the future for folks, or how this could be used as a tool for others, I think, like, first and foremost, like, we don't own any of the mediums, right? Like, that these are opportunities for folks to think about, is there something that they've heard today that they think that they could kind of actualize in their own practice, or in their own way in which they're moving through the world, or in how they're connecting with people, right? I think that the opportunity here is to just kind of take to heart that call to creativity and responsiveness and collective investment in knowledge, in building community and in and in just like being able to adjust kind of to the world around you and the needs of the people you're meant to serve. And so that's like I think what I envision folks can take away into the future is that more of a call to action, really.
Mark, do you have any thoughts on how this can kind of build into an educational tool?
Yeah, it's obviously hopefully going to be the Neo Newtonwick podcast, sort of a repository of information that maybe people haven't been able to see before. It'll be online, as long as things are online, and be accessible to folk. And I know when I was a young professor and trying to teach myself Indigenous legal order stuff, it was very helpful that other professors had their lectures on YouTube, that they had conversations put out there. And so, again, the podcast is a conversation, hopefully at its best. And hopefully it's a way to invite people to join that conversation and get a little more comfortable with some of these terms and language. Just like any law, we have our words and they can seem impenetrable. Obviously, we've been saying epistemology and big words in the sort of European context, but Minobizadawewan is a big word too, and there's a lot of knowledge within that word. And just even getting folk to understand that the Indigenous language contains that law. And the different endings of a word connote different things and how you should treat the rest of the word. And so even within Minobizadawewan, there's the Minnow, which is like the good, and then you get to the Win, and the Win is a recognition that there's a way of living within that word. And so learning even those little tips can help you access those words and those knowledge and get, again, more comfortable with that fluency. Obviously, not getting to a place where everyone can speak in Anishinaabewan or Innu, but hopefully, but at least get more comfortable with some of these words. And for folk who are on here who are legal learners, they've gotten very used to learning very big words and Latin words, stare decisis, these sort of things. But they still have a hesitancy to engage with Indigenous languages. And so hopefully the podcast, which again will have a lot of Cree words and Anishinaabe words in it, we'll be able to also have those transcribed. And so we'll have it in English and French and the traditional language of the knowledge holder that we're having. So although it's also this visual auditory medium, we'll also have the ability to have all of that with the written word. And then also have an ability to have like a companion education piece potentially. So, and then just coming to the Robson Radio podcasts, just generally it's a way for folk to get to know the dean of a law school. Why are we doing these initiatives? Where is this coming from? And sort of personalize it a little more. And I know in my podcast, just letting folk know how we're trying to indigenize the content and the place and space. And just again, it's hopefully an invitation in. And so it's a tool for legal professionals in the future, but more for education in general, I think. And hopefully every lawyer knows they're lifelong learners. And hopefully these projects that we're talking about are ways that they can continue to learn and engage.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I've taught in other faculties, and assigning podcasts instead of readings is always something that's appreciated by students. I think that that's really exciting. Kirsten and Jesse, do you have anything that you'd like to add in terms of kind of building these modalities as tools for educating future legal professionals?
I'll go first if that's okay. So art is a very powerful educational tool. How legal professionals can use it within like their practice or in their firms or their spaces or engaging community. Like by having art supplies like in your office, you can ask someone to like make some art about it. I'm thinking about like working with youth, which I do a lot through art. Um, Having art in your physical space, giving something someone can look at is very beneficial, like helps make the physical space more welcoming or calming, depending on the type of imagery you choose to use within your space. And also if you're wanting to like get out into community and leave your office or your firm and go be with the people, bring some art supplies and have that with you and like make art together. Like you don't have to be an artist to make art. Maybe you just have like a legal like a question that you want to ask the community that will help influence you for, or you're trying to gather information from the peoples to help you with your legal things. Like just having art supplies around would be really helpful. Having art around like in a physical space is really helpful. Yeah, or just even hiring artists to come and facilitate time together. That's also super helpful.
Thanks, Jesse. So just noting the time, Kirsten, I'm wondering if I can combine one of the Q&A questions with your response to the last question. And one of those questions is, to what extent are these resources being directed to youth, such as those at the Manitoba Youth Center?
Yeah, so the Manitoba Youth Center also doesn't have a library. And so the Prison Libraries Committee has been going in to MYC for the past year and a half with a pop-up library. It's been hugely successful, very, very successful. In terms of legal information, we haven't been providing a ton of that. We do offer also an email reference service. So folks can email us through their teacher with questions. Sometimes those are legal related, and then we can respond back. We do have the phone number, the toll-free number for the Manitoba Law Library now added to all of the Synergy telephones. So it is a free call to everybody. So they can call and talk to a law library worker, right away with any questions, and then they can fax them or send them information. But I also just wanted to say too, at MYC, what we're doing that's also really important in terms of engaging with the young people is providing workshops. So we're just in the midst of, we're just getting Chimwemwe Undi, the poet laureate, lawyer, all around amazing person. She's going to be going in starting on Saturday to do a series of 4 workshops, poetry workshops with the kids. I don't even think that we need to have stuff like that's directly legal related. I think some of this stuff just will come up anyway in these workshops as they're creating art. We had Osani Balkaran come and do a sort of a hip hop songwriting workshop with the youth. We've had artists come in and do art workshops because that is such an important way of expression. So and we're also actually working with a group of students who got quite a big grant, like $30,000 to go in and actually create a library space, Indigenous collection, new furniture, shelving, etc., at the youth center. So there's a lot of work being done, and I think just sort of the legal information piece will come along with it as well.
Awesome. And so the last question is, what resources beyond traditional hard to access legal aid services can individuals use to find affordable or free legal assistance? Mark or Allison?
Well, Jessie popped up with her hand real quick.
Oh,
So
yeah,
maybe
okay.
Sure.
Sorry, I was looking at the questions.
Oh, I know that the University of Manitoba has got a lot of like clinics going on where you can access like free legal services through them. It's like you're an artist yourself. They have an arts like a legal clinic for the arts. They got one for business if you want to be like an entrepreneur and start your own things there. But yeah, there's a lot of services that you can access for free. But I really love just searching on the internet.
Yeah, I think speaking to that, like some of our projects hopefully are providing legal information or more accessible ways for folk to find legal information that would be of assistance. Obviously, we support several other sort of projects like the Legal Help Center, We have Pro Bono Service Canada at the Robson Hall, which services, I don't even know how many nonprofits and social enterprise-like projects. But yeah, I think really the big shift at Robson Hall has been a move towards clinical learning and clinical experiences, which has allowed us to, I think we have 12 clinics now, so in different varieties. We have our Indigenous externship now going into communities. We're drafting wills for folk. We can help with pardons, record suspensions, and other such things like that. But really this whole Access to Justice network, which you're hearing about, and then we have Natasha Brown leading, is really becoming a hub of folk trying to do good work and creating, again, this collaborative approach where we recognize that we're all doing a little piece and we put all of our work together, we get a lot more done. Is this the solution for how difficult it is to access legal services? It's a start, but I know all of our projects are also advocating for change. So we're trying to change the correctional systems to be more accessible. We're trying to, reach out into communities, so trying to bring our law students in front of young Indigenous students on First Nations, in many places where they might not have seen an Indigenous person in a suit before, let alone a lawyer and someone who can advocate and bring some of those informations through. So again, really that access to justice is also seeing yourself here, being able to see yourself in these spaces and roles, and that law isn't something that's just here to oppress you, which is the message that most Indigenous people have received and are still receiving, but it can also hopefully be a tool for reconciliation. And hopefully at our best, we'll be able to bring Indigenous legal orders and our knowledge systems into these spaces, which will just have to reform them because we have a different worldview, we have a different way of knowing and being, and our laws are more, I think, dynamic and able to address some of the problems of the day in ways that this very structured, static common law system just isn't that nimble with its precedential system. Yeah, again, none of these projects are going to solve that access to legal services issue and the barrier to finances. That's something I think the whole profession has to sort of wrestle with. And even to say the hard to access legal aid services, let's advocate the government for more funding. Legal aid would love to expand services and to do things like have private Gladue writers, but these things all take political will and political capital. So coming back again, hopefully these projects will get to a place of more mutual respect and a place where we're inviting more people into the conversation. And that's really the future, right? We need to get to the youth. We need to enliven these knowledge systems and ways of knowing and being, and also break down this hegemon, this idea that law is paramount. We are the experts. We're better than everyone else. We're the upper class. That all has to be brought down a bit more. We have to be a little more humble, which is why we have the 7 sacred teachings, which remind us humility comes first, so I don't know if I answered that question fulsomely, but that's what we got.
I think you did. Allison, did you want to add anything?
I was just going to add something again, building on what Mark has said about like seeing law as one piece of. I also see that in like the provision of legal services, a more tangible connection to where can people get assistance, which is there's been some good kind of shifts in the right direction when it comes to some regulatory adjustments that allow civil society organizations to provide legal services. And so I think you see a greater experimentation with providing services from a place of like embedding legal supports and services within other organizations, and this move towards more like holistic and wraparound type services. So I think of examples like some of the legal supports that are available through Welcome Place, for newcomers and refugees, some of the legal supports that are built directly into a women's place in Norwest's, that project around domestic violence, right? They have a part-time lawyer on staff. The First Nation Family Advocate Office was one of the first places that like civil society organization, Law Society changed. One of the first places that you saw that happen was embedding legal services, embedding lawyers right directly within AMC's First Nation Family Advocate Office. And that was a really important collaboration between AMC and legal aid in order to make that happen. And so things like that are ways. There are a number of existing community organizations that might already have some legal services or legal information embedded within them, or that might be able to be a bridge for folks into getting more affordable or free legal assistance. So I just wanted to mention, organizations like CLIA, right, the Community Legal Education Association, InfoJustice, right? There are legal actors that are trying to bridge these gaps, and then there are also really important nonprofit and other community organizations that are trying to also meet their own community's legal needs.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right, so I just want to say miigwech to all of you for sharing. This was a really exciting conversation, and I also, have follow-up questions for all of you and some of the work that we're all doing together, so that's great. And so I'll just mention quickly again that the recording can be found on the mbaccesstojustice.ca website in a few weeks' time. And miigwech to everyone for attending today.